from the election. And tonight we hosted the final face-off between candidates to lead Minnesota's largest city.
As you start to engage, you find out, hey, this dudette
writing it. I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. And
what if the quiet spa next door wasn't a spa at all, but a battlefield? Behind frosted glass and softly humming fountains, the illusion of peace hid a global crime network. Across America's suburbs, what looked like wellness centers were in fact the front lines of a trafficking empire, one so sophisticated it mirrored the logistics of military operations. That illusion shattered at dawn when Operation Coast to Coast began. The investigation revealed a web that stretched far beyond America's suburbs, a network as intricate as it was invisible. What agents discovered inside those shuttered massage parlors was only the surface of a sprawling system connecting US storefronts to Chinese criminal syndicates operating out of Macau, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. Reuters and BBC News traced the financial heartbeat of the operation: encrypted payments, coded ledgers, and a rotation system that moved victims across 5 states every few months. The strategy wasn't chaos, it was order disguised as randomness. Each woman was tagged, relocated, and retrained to prevent attachment or recognition. Every storefront operated under a different business name, its profits laundered through wellness consulting companies and shell firms registered under ghost identities. Homeland Security investigators called it a corporate model of human slavery. Victims were recruited through online job ads written in Mandarin promising visas, housing, and legitimate employment. But upon arrival, their passports were seized, debts fabricated, and every movement monitored by handlers posing as managers. The victims weren't prisoners in cages, they were prisoners of paperwork and fear. DW reported that the network's structure resembled tactics once used by Balkan trafficking rings and more recently by Ukrainian militias controlling civilian transport routes during wartime displacement. Trafficking had evolved into a weaponized economy, one that exploited the same freedom of movement that global trade relies on. Behind it all, analysts identified what they now call a shadow syndicate: brokers, accountants, and enforcers operating in both the US and China. According to The Guardian, seized communications revealed that some of the profits were funneled into real estate investments across California and Florida. The sophistication stunned investigators. They moved like a multinational corporation, one FBI official told BBC News, except their product is human life. President Donald Trump's administration responded swiftly. Invoking the Homeland Integrity Reform Directive, he expanded federal powers to pursue cross-border enterprises linked to hostile foreign entities. The order allowed trafficking investigations to draw on the same tools once used against espionage and cyber warfare, blurring the boundary between law enforcement and national defense. Al Jazeera noted that this fusion of domestic policing and global intelligence reflects a new security doctrine, one that views trafficking as hybrid warfare. Just as cyber attacks and financial manipulation erode nations from within, so too does industrialized exploitation. Every spa shut down was not only a criminal victory, but a strategic one. But amid the data and strategy lay the human cost. One survivor, identified as May, told investigators she was promised a waitress job in Los Angeles, but was flown to Missouri and locked in a small room. Her captors told her that if she ran, police would arrest her. They said America only protects Americans, she told Al Jazeera. Her words pierced the illusion of safety, proof that even in the land of liberty, freedom could be weaponized as a lie. And so the question deepened: if traffickers can turn opportunity into oppression, can democracy still call itself free while its shadows sell the human soul? Unmarked SUVs crept through the darkness in cities from Texas to New York. Agents from the FBI, ICE, and Homeland Security waited for a single command: execute. When doors splintered open, the scent of candles and disinfectant gave way to fear. Inside cramped back rooms, women were found locked behind curtains, sleeping on towels, their passports confiscated, their freedom traded for survival. Some had not seen daylight in months. It began with a promise, a job, a visa, a chance to start anew. For hundreds of women from China's Fujian and Guangdong provinces, that promise became a trap. Behind the pastel signs of wellness centers and dimly lit reception rooms, investigators uncovered what DW called a quiet empire of fear. Each victim's story was eerily identical: arrival through legal channels, immediate isolation, and a descent into servitude disguised as employment. The system thrived on control. Every woman's debt was inflated, every freedom revoked. Surveillance cameras hung over sleeping mats. Windows were sealed shut. The Guardian reported that traffickers created fabricated contracts in both English and Mandarin, forcing victims to sign them under threat of deportation. In those papers, their autonomy vanished. Their names became numbers in ledgers coded as therapist rotations. BBC News journalists gained access to testimony from one survivor identified as Gia. She whispered through tears, "I thought America was freedom, but freedom was the lie they sold me." Her story mirrored those from Ukraine, where women displaced by war were recruited into similar networks under the guise of safety. Al Jazeera drew chilling parallels to Iran-backed militias in the Gulf, who used migrant corridors as tools of coercion. The pattern was global. Human bodies turned into currency for power. What agents found in those rooms reflected a new kind of slavery, one adapted for the digital age. Each parlor kept precise logs of appointments, movement schedules, and earnings. Jane's Defense Weekly analyst compared it to military supply chain discipline, where every asset is tracked, rotated, and replaced. But the assets in this case were people. The emotional weight of the discovery shook even hardened federal officers. One ICE commander described opening a door to find 3 women sleeping in a windowless closet. They didn't scream, he told Reuters. They just froze, as if freedom was another trick. The operation also revealed an ideological battlefield, a clash between open societies and weaponized exploitation. The traffickers had exploited America's transparency, its visa programs, and its belief in second chances. They used our laws against us, said one DHS analyst to Defense News. They studied our compassion like a playbook. In Washington, President Donald Trump met with Homeland Security officials to expand what he called Freedom Restoration Protocols programs, uniting anti-trafficking enforcement with humanitarian recovery. The administration emphasized that liberation must come with rebuilding trauma care, legal protection, and economic reintegration. "We can't just free victims," Trump said in remarks cited by The Guardian. "We must free their future." Globally, the raid reignited debate on the cost of freedom. DW noted that democratic nations face a paradox. Their openness invites both opportunity and exploitation. In contrast, authoritarian states like China claim control, but conceal oppression beneath secrecy. The question for the West now loomed: could liberty survive the weight of its own ideals? The women rescued in Operation Coast to Coast now symbolize more than victims. They represent a test of what America stands for. Their silent courage, their slow rediscovery of voice has become the truest mirror of the nation that saved them. And yet the haunting question persists in a world where freedom can be forged into chains. Who ensures that liberation does not become another illusion? According to Reuters, more than 30 suspects were arrested and over 60 victims were freed, one of the largest anti-trafficking operations in modern US history. BBC News reported that evidence tied these spas to Chinese triads operating from Macau and Hong Kong, using shell companies and fake wellness licenses to move money and people with industrial precision. Each parlor was a node in a network that rotated victims every few weeks to prevent escape or detection. Money was the bloodstream of the entire empire, silent, coded, and ceaseless. The spas, the consulting firms, the fake wellness chains were only surface camouflage. Beneath them pulsed a complex financial network as intricate as any intelligence operation. What Operation Coast to Coast exposed was not just organized vice, but a new kind of economic warfare, one waged through ledgers, algorithms, and ghost accounts. Reuters and DW reported that agents from Homeland Security's Financial Crimes Division traced more than 200 US-based shell accounts, each registered under small wellness or consulting businesses. Their purpose: to route micro deposits through fintech platforms, fragmenting and disguising profits from forced labor. The money then vanished into corporate registries in Hong Kong and Macau, where it was reassembled and redistributed into offshore portfolios linked to Chinese organized crime. Federal analysts found that some of the same escrow accounts used to launder trafficking profits had also processed legitimate real estate deals in Florida and California. They weren't hiding under the table, one IRS agent told The Guardian. They were hiding in plain sight. The scale stunned investigators. In total, millions of dollars had cycled through America's banking system undetected until artificial intelligence flagged patterns too perfect to be coincidence. Each transaction was coded as therapy consulting or wellness supplies. Every victim was given a numeric identifier in accounting software, turning human suffering into financial abstraction. The pattern was global. During Russia's invasion of Ukraine, intelligence analysts uncovered similar laundering models used by oligarchs to evade sanctions, splitting assets into thousands of smaller transactions routed through neutral nations. Defense News compared the two systems directly. What oligarchs did to evade oversight, traffickers now do to evade morality. Under President Donald Trump, the Department of Justice authorized the creation of the Joint Analytical Command, a fusion cell of the FBI, IRS, and Homeland Security cyber units. Their mandate frees every account, expose every shell firm, and sever every pipeline connecting the American underground to foreign networks. Within days, crypto wallets holding over $1.2 million in USDT and Monero were identified and seized. But the implications reached further than economics. Analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly described the findings as non-kinetic warfare financial subversion disguised as commerce. By embedding criminal operations inside legitimate economies, adversarial groups could weaken American sovereignty without firing a single shot. China's triads, long dismissed as purely criminal, now appeared to serve dual purposes: profit generation and geopolitical leverage. In Washington, Treasury officials urged sweeping reforms, tighter cash business reporting, expanded oversight for fintech platforms, and mandatory beneficial ownership transparency for small corporations. But critics warned of overreach. Civil liberties advocates cautioned that in chasing hidden money, the US risked constructing the architecture of a surveillance state. You can't defend freedom, one senator argued, by building its prison. Still, the alternative, doing nothing, was unthinkable. Each unchecked transaction represented another stolen life, another victory for invisible power. The new slave ships are spreadsheets, Al Jazeera wrote in a searing editorial, and their captains wear suits, not chains. In the sterile quiet of the command center, agents stared at screens filled with numbers, names, and nations. The war on trafficking had become a war on the unseen. Homeland Security called it industrialized human exploitation. The traffickers used legitimate storefronts to hide systemic slavery their victims controlled through debt deception and digital surveillance. The Guardian revealed that some communications between US-based operators and Chinese handlers were routed through encrypted channels used by cybercrime syndicates. What began as an investigation into visa fraud had exposed a machine of global exploitation. And as one Homeland Security analyst murmured to Reuters, when freedom becomes data, whoever controls the data controls the people. The question now was chillingly clear: to defeat an enemy that hides in systems of freedom, must freedom itself become a system of control. The raids began before the sun rose. Across 5 states, convoys of unmarked SUVs glided through empty streets, headlights off, radios silent. At 4:15 a.m., the command crackled through encrypted channels: execute. Within minutes, America's quietest neighborhoods became the scene of its most synchronized counter-trafficking assault. The operation was called Coast to Coast, and its precision stunned even veteran agents. More than 150 agencies, from the FBI to ICE Homeland Security investigations and the U.S. Marshals Service, struck simultaneously. Doors splintered in Texas, New York, Missouri, and Alabama. Pastel storefronts labeled Lotus Spa or Healing Touch were breached by armed teams in tactical gear. Inside, the contrast was chilling. Scented candles still burned beside locked cabinets stuffed with fake passports, prepaid phones, and rolls of cash. Reuters reported that by dawn, 30 suspects were in custody, and more than 60 women had been rescued. One, a 14-year-old Chinese girl, was found hidden behind a false wall in a Missouri spa. She hadn't seen daylight in weeks, one agent told BBC News. Her only view of the world was through a vent. The operation's tempo rivaled a military strike. Defense News confirmed that federal command centers used real-time drone feeds and geolocation pings to synchronize entries across time zones. Jane's Defense Weekly called it a domestic demonstration of multi-domain warfare, a fusion of human intelligence, cyber interception, and ground action modeled on counterinsurgency tactics once used in Afghanistan. In Washington, President Donald Trump addressed the nation hours later, praising the task force for proving that America still has the courage to defend its soul. He framed trafficking as not merely a moral evil, but an assault on sovereignty. When foreign syndicates profit from our borders, he said they are not guests, they are invaders. But beneath the triumph, a quieter struggle unfolded, one of compassion. In parking lots and community centers near the raided businesses, temporary triage units sprang up. Freedom Network USA and Safe House Alliance volunteers tended to frighten survivors. Some victims, trembling under blankets, whispered that they'd been told US police would harm them if they ever sought help. They thought we were the enemy, said one ICE medic to The Guardian, until we handed them water instead of orders. DW later described the humanitarian phase of the mission as the heart that that kept the operation human. Agents worked alongside trauma specialists to translate, feed, and shelter the rescued. Many women were too dehydrated to speak. Others wept silently when shown sunlight for the first time in months. The juxtaposition was jarring federal power and fragile hope under the same roof. Globally, the raids triggered ripples. European police forces began sharing intelligence with US counterparts. Al Jazeera reported that Germany and France were preparing joint initiatives against similar trafficking corridors tied to Eastern Europe. In Israel, security experts called the operation a model of moral warfare, proof that enforcement could coexist with empathy. President Donald Trump's administration responded by elevating human trafficking to a national security priority, equating it with terrorism and narco crime. The reasoning was clear: transnational trafficking isn't just a social crime, it's a sovereignty breach. When foreign syndicates can operate businesses on American soil under legal disguise, the threat goes beyond morality. It strikes at the integrity of the republic itself. Yet even as Washington celebrated victory, analysts warned of the Hydra effect. For every trafficking hub dismantled, two could rise anew. Networks adapt faster than laws. The United States had won a battle, not the war. As the sun rose over the crime scenes, one question hung heavy in the still air: if evil can thrive behind curtains and scented candles, how many more monsters still hide in the ordinary, and how long before America must strike again? By dawn the following day, the spas were empty, but the evidence they left behind told a story that stretched across continents. Rows of laptops, phones, and handwritten ledgers filled the long tables at the Federal Command Center in Virginia. The air hummed with servers as forensic teams from the FBI, IRS, and Homeland Security began decrypting a digital labyrinth that mapped modern slavery with surgical precision. According to Reuters, investigators uncovered more than 60,000 encrypted chat logs documenting payments, coded commands, and rotation schedules. Emoji signals arose for a cleared payment. A wave for a new victim transfer disguised the coordination of an empire built on exploitation. It was organized crime in the language of convenience, one senior DHS official told BBC News. The discovery forced an unprecedented response. The Department of Justice created the Joint Analytical Task Force, a fusion cell linking financial, cyber, and human intelligence units. Its mission: dismantle every foreign link and financial artery sustaining the network. Early findings revealed money moving through Nevada, Hong Kong, and Cayman Island firms with cryptocurrency wallets, some already flagged for fentanyl trafficking, serving as the digital equivalent of offshore havens. For President Donald Trump, this was more than a criminal case. It was a warning shot in a larger conflict. He ordered the Treasury Department to expand transnational crime sanctions, the same tools once reserved for terrorist financiers, against those connected to human trafficking. If money is their weapon, a White House advisor told The Guardian, then exposure will be ours. Yet even as Washington tightened its grip, the tension between freedom and control grew impossible to ignore. Lawmakers proposed strict licensing and surveillance requirements for cash-based businesses. DW reported fierce debates in Congress, where civil libertarians warned that a country that tracks every transaction may save its innocence but lose its privacy. Still, few could argue that inaction was worse. Abroad, the aftershocks were immediate. Interpol and Europol expanded their cooperation with US agencies, while Al Jazeera reported that Southeast Asian nations began their own crackdowns on syndicates tied to Chinese triads. The operation had become a global case study, a reminder that slavery thrives not in lawlessness, but in loopholes. At home, communities were left stunned. In small towns across Missouri and Alabama, residents told The Guardian they had walked past the raided spas for years, never suspecting what lay inside. "We thought they were normal businesses," said one store owner. "Turns out the evil was next door." As survivors began rehabilitation, social workers described the slow process of rebuilding trust. Many victims couldn't sleep without lights on. Some refused to open doors, even to helpers. They lived in silence so long, one volunteer told BBC News they forgot how to speak without fear. Strategically, Washington began rethinking domestic enforcement like counterinsurgency, combining financial forensics, cyber intelligence, and field raids into a unified command. Analysts from Defense News noted that the same intelligence fusion used in Afghanistan is now used in Atlanta. The battlefield had come home. In Washington, the triumph of Operation Coast to Coast became both symbol and warning. It proved that America could strike deep into hidden networks, but it also revealed how fragile freedom becomes when vigilance fades. Jane's Defense Weekly captured the paradox. The same openness that built democracy also built its vulnerabilities. To protect liberty, the United States now fights with the tools once reserved for war. And as President Trump stood in the White House briefing room, flanked by agents and survivors, he spoke words that would echo far beyond America's borders. Freedom is not inherited, it is defended, and today, we defended it. The applause faded, but one question remained, one that no operation, however precise, could silence. If freedom must now be guarded like a secret, how long before the fortress becomes the cage? Yet even as agents secured victims and evidence, a darker question emerged, one that would haunt policymakers long after the raids ended. How could such a vast system thrive unnoticed in the world's most surveilled democracy? The truth was as simple as it was horrifying it survived because it looked ordinary. If slavery can hide in plain sight, what else might be living quietly among us, waiting for someone to knock on the wrong door?